Chapter 16. The Dark Star. The river raged, a churning beast of white water and unforgiving stone. Vargoth, more a twisted nightmare given flesh than any creature of nature, clawed his way through the torrent. Jagged rocks slammed into his dark blue hide, each impact a searing jolt of pain that resonated deep within his bone and sinew. He'd been swept over the waterfall, a humiliating cascade that had left him battered, his pride shattered, and his rage incandescent. The water had been a cold, indifferent mockery, tossing him like a rag doll, stripping him of his predatory control. It was an insult to his very being, a cosmic sneer he would repay 1,000-fold. Finally, with a Herculean surge of brute instinct, he dragged himself onto the muddy bank, his powerful limbs trembling not from exhaustion, but from the furious effort of defiance. He collapsed onto the cold, damp earth, his breath coming in ragged, guttural gasps that tore at his throat. The air here was thick with the scent of decay and damp soil, a morbid perfume that clung to the oppressive stillness. A forest of crumbling headstones loomed in the gathering gloom, their weathered faces tilted at incongruous angles, like forgotten teeth in the maw of a vast, unseen beast. Monuments to lives long extinguished, they stood as silent witnesses to his indignity. Perfect. He stood, water cascading from his sleek, powerful form, forming rivulets that snaked across the mud. His muscles rippled under his dark blue hide, taut as coiled springs. He shook his head, a violent tremor that sent droplets of river water showering over the ancient graves. His pale, now electrically glowing blue eyes burned with cold fury, twin beacons in the deepening twilight. The indignity of the river, the audacity of the current. It was a slight, a personal affront that demanded retribution. He would find something to kill, something to punish for the universe's insolence, for the sheer audacity of its indifferent power. But then, something else came into mind. A thought that cooled the immediate inferno of his rage into a simmering, focused heat. He licked moisture from the inside of his forearm, the metallic taste of river water mixing with something ancient and mineral. He did not walk. He stalked, head low, shoulder blades rising and falling with each step, like a predator crouching in tall grass, unseen, unheard, a phantasm of bone and muscle in the encroaching fog. The wind spoke, a mournful sigh weaving through the skeletal branches of ancient trees, but he didn't answer. He only listened. Every rustle of brush, every distant snap of a twig made his jaw clench, a muscle knotting dangerously in his cheek. His neck twitched, his head swiveling with a precision that belied his recent ordeal. He was always alert, always scanning, like a wolf pack watching for prey to stray from the herd, every nerve ending screaming a warning. His pace was feral, rapid in short bursts, then still, his head tilting with unnatural curiosity, like he could hear the thoughts of the trees, the silent whispers of the shifting earth. The air, already heavy with the scent of decay from the graveyard, thickened with fine, cold mist as he moved deeper into the forest. It clung to his hide, beaded on the sharp angles of his horns, and swirled around his glowing eyes, making the world a muted, indistinct canvas of grays and blacks. The fog was his ally, a natural cloak that amplified his menacing presence, while concealing his precise form. And something inside him hungered, a gnawing, primal emptiness that even the river's violence couldn't wash away. It wasn't a hunger for food, not in the traditional sense. It was a deeper, more insidious craving, a thirst for control, for power, for the visceral act of inflicting terror. He wasn't wounded, not truly. Bruised, yes. The memory of the rocks striking him, the searing jolts of pain, was still fresh, but it was just that. Cuts, maybe. Shallow gashes hidden beneath his sleek hide, weeping dark, viscous fluid that mingled with the river water still clinging to him. But Vargoth's pain was a shallow river, one that never slowed his stride, never diminished the absolute clarity of his intent. His kind didn't stop to heal. They endured, because that's what monsters did. They were defined by their relentless, unforgiving nature. Climbing the dry slopes toward his mountain, the ground grew firmer under his scythe claws, less yielding than the graveyard mud. Pine needles crunched underfoot, a brittle counterpoint to the soft sigh of the wind. He no longer resembled anything human. The faint echoes of his origin had long since been stripped away, replaced by the raw, untamed essence of a predator. He moved like instinct, given shape, sniffing the air, tasting the moisture, detecting the minute changes in temperature, sliding around trees like a hunting cat, a dark blur against the gathering gloom. Theropods didn't need to chase often. They waited, and so did Vargoth at times, freezing in place for minutes, a statue carved from shadow, eyes locked on movement only he could see, a ripple in the fog, a tremor in the undergrowth that escaped human perception. His patience was as chilling as his fury. He remembered the faces, the screams, the blood. He remembered Emily's determination to rescue Jake, a memory that pricked at him like a venomous thorn, a promise of defiance that Vargoth will always prevent from happening. That girl, with her absurd, fragile courage, dared to challenge him, to stand against the inevitable. It was a thought that curled his lips, though he didn't outwardly grin. Instead, his eyes flickered, the electrical blue intensifying, a silent crackle of malevolent amusement at the sheer futility of her efforts. By the time dusk began to stretch its long, skeletal fingers across the broken hills, painting the sky in bruised purples and blood oranges that bled into the omnipresent fog, Vargoth reached the cragged base of the tall mountain. His cave waited at the summit, a dark maw hidden behind a curtain of hanging roots and twisted rocks that looked like the gnarled fingers of some ancient, petrified god. The climb was steep, a vertical ascent that would daunt any lesser creature, but he knew every foothold, every crevice, every jutting shard of rock. His claws scraped into the stone like old memories, finding purchase with effortless certainty, carving new scars into the ancient mountain face. At the edge of the cave mouth, where the last vestiges of twilight dared to penetrate, he paused. He sniffed, his nostrils flaring, drawing in the dry mineral scent of rock, the faint metallic tang of his own presence, and something else, something still and inert. Jake was there, still resting in his cell, a captive prize. No scent but his own, faintly mingled with the stale air of imprisonment. The boy's scent was weak, passive, reassuring in its lack of struggle. He stepped inside. Darkness, thick and absolute, swallowed him whole, but Vargoth welcomed it. This was where the light couldn't reach him, where no one screamed unless he wanted them to, where he could listen to the wind whisper things no sane man should understand, secrets carried on the currents of the air, the lament of lost souls, the promise of unmade futures. It was a symphony of chaos and despair, and he found it comforting. He crouched in the back corner of the cave, a vast shadowed expanse carved by ancient forces. His eyes gleamed like twin coals in the dark, reflecting nothing but their own internal fire. He had made it home, but even here, safe, alone, he never relaxed. His claws twitched in his sleep, phantom movements against imagined prey. His horns pricked at imagined footsteps, at the subtle shifts of the mountain. The sharpness of the two wolves still lived in him. Not just the strength, the raw, crushing power that could rend flesh and bone, but the paranoia, the craving, the instinct. Because a monster like Vargoth didn't return home to rest. He returned to kill another day. There was no pain now, just hunger, a deep abyssal hunger that had been stoked by the humiliation of the river, by the memory of soft human skin, by the ghost of Emily's defiant gaze. Hunger for return. Hunger for vengeance. He stood before the mouth of the cave, his own home, weather-beaten and cracked by millennia of wind, rain, and cold. Memories clawed back with feral urgency, sharper now in the oppressive solitude. The shrill, painful bite that cost his right eye, the very moment that had sent him plummeting into the churning river earlier, a fall that had been both physically painful and profoundly emasculating. He had been nothing short of an evil beast back then, a creature of brute force and primal hatred. And now he would become something else entirely, something more. Inside the cave, the lingering dust disturbed by his earlier entrance had settled once more. No sign of intrusion. It was cold, almost quiet, save for the whisper of the wind at the cave mouth and the drip of condensation from the ceiling. Vargoth stood motionless for a long moment, ears twitching, sifting through the layers of silence, confirming his solitude. His breath now came low and deliberate, a soft rasp that was barely audible even to himself. Then, with a guttural growl that seemed to rip from the very core of his being, he slammed his scythe-clawed hand into a stone wall, the impact echoing like a thunderclap in the confined space. A spiderweb of cracks erupted from the point of impact, spreading across the ancient rock. He couldn't let it happen again. No more defeats, no more games, no more childish taunts from those infuriating, ephemeral pests. He would not be outsmarted, ever again. Vargoth began pacing like a caged raptor, his movements now tighter, more precise, each step an earthquake of suppressed power. Something in him had fundamentally changed in the wake of the river's affront. The way he stalked around, low to the ground, head tilting to the side like a predator assessing prey, was unmistakably primal, distilled menace. He let out a rasping hiss as he scraped his claws down a slab of stone, mimicking the eerie, bone-chilling echo of fast-biters from the old hunting valleys of memory. Creatures that never gave up, never forgave, their tenacity legendary, their brutality absolute. He would embody that relentless, unforgiving spirit. Then something flickered in his memory, a spark in the dark recesses of his ancient mind. Long ago, before the butterfly girls, before even the cave had become his refuge, there had been whispers in the deepest corners of the outlands, rumors carried on the wind, spun by terrified creatures huddled around dying fires, of a place forgotten. A ruined church, swallowed by thorn and time, its stone bones picked clean by the centuries. And within its broken altar, so the whispers claimed, lay something darker than shadow, older than night itself. The Dark Star. That was its name in the rumors, a chilling, resonant name that bespoke of power unimaginable. No one who sought it ever returned, and those who happened upon its periphery were said to be driven mad by its mere proximity, their minds shattered, their bodies twisted. Some claimed it was a shard of something that had fallen from beyond the stars, a piece of cosmic horror, pulsing with ancient unholy power, radiating an aura that could warp reality itself. Others called it a curse, a living wound in the earth, a place where the veil between worlds had worn thin. Vargoth didn't care what it was, only what it could do. He cared nothing for its origins, only its potential. If the Dark Star truly held power, then he could use it. Harness it, bend it to his will, a weapon forged in the crucible of cosmic darkness. And with that power, he would destroy the butterfly girls, not just scatter them like glittering dust, not just make them flee, but erase every trace of them from existence. He would obliterate every giggle, every sparkle, every flutter of their pastel wings, ensuring their names became a forgotten nightmare. And no new heroes, no soft-hearted girls like Emily, would ever rise again to challenge him, to rescue any fragile human like Jake, to cast a shadow on his absolute dominion. Their desperate, foolish hopes would be crushed forever. The decaying map, once a symbol of innocent joy, now lay splayed against the cavernous wall, a grotesque tapestry of twisted intent. Vargoth surveyed it with predatory calculation, his pale blue eyes gleaming with a cold, cruel intelligence. His sleek dark blue form radiated an unsettling power, a malevolent grace that seemed to absorb the cavern's meager light, leaving the very air colder in its wake. Outside, the wind howled, a visceral symphony mirroring the storm brewing within him, a tempest of ambition and malevolence. Emily, Anna, and Zoe, the names echoed in his mind, sharp, persistent lights piercing the encroaching darkness of his plans. He knew their relentless pursuit was inevitable. He could feel them drawing closer, fueled by a naive courage and a damnable love for the defective boy. They were a thorn, a loose thread, in the carefully woven net of his dominion over Jake. He had to sever that connection, secure his grip on the boy, solidify the darkness that now shielded him. With a disturbing focus, a slow, deliberate movement that spoke of profound malice, he plunged a pushpin into a point on the map. It was a desolate, forgotten corner tucked deep within the mountain's labyrinthine interior. A place so remote it had faded even from local legends. The location was perfect, an ancient crumbling church, a place where hope withered and shadows thrived, where the echoes of ancient despair clung to crumbling stones. A place where Jake's spirit would finally break. But a map wasn't enough. Vargoth's thoughts twisted towards Jake, still clinging to a naive hope of escape, a flickering ember in the storm he intended to unleash. A cruel smile stretched across his face, stretching the leathery skin around his jaw, transforming his features into a mask of pure sadism. It was time to break that hope, to cruelly use the boy against his friends, to make Jake himself a weapon against their love. He relished the thought of the pain he would inflict, the terror he would inspire, the inevitable, soul-shattering despair in their hearts. Jake awoke to the chilling reality of his captivity. His head throbbed, a dull ache that amplified the suffocating dread pressing down on him. His senses, usually a gentle filter for the world, now screamed at him. Where am I?" he mumbled, his voice raspy and weak, barely a whisper against the vast silence. He was strapped to a cold metal table, the shackles biting into his wrists, drawing angry red lines on his pale skin. The air hung thick and heavy, laden with the stench of damp earth and something else, something acrid and metallic, like old blood and rust, that made his stomach churn with nausea. Panic clawed at his throat, a venomous serpent constricting his breath. He strained against the restraints, his muscles screaming in protest, but they held firm, unyielding iron against his desperate, fragile strength. The heavy thud of Vargoth's approach, a rhythmic, predatory sound that vibrated through the very rock of the cavern floor, sent a wave of icy terror through him. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating silence, each beat a desperate plea for escape. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing for oblivion, desperately trying to block out the image of the monster. But it was no use. Vargoth's twisted face, his gleaming eye, his sleek, powerful form. It was etched into his mind, a terrifying masterpiece of primal fear. Vargoth towered over Jake, his shadow swallowing the boy whole, plunging him into an even deeper abyss of despair. He held something in his hand, a rusted, makeshift cross forged from scraps of metal, its edges sharp and jagged, almost like a crude weapon. He thrust it towards Jake, the boy's trembling hands instinctively reaching out to grasp it, a desperate reflex for something, anything, tangible in this nightmare. The cold metal offered a sliver of comfort, a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness, a phantom promise of protection that Jake knew was false. "Time to get your brain working, kid." Vargoth's voice was a low growl, a guttural rasp that vibrated through the cavern air, through Jake's very bones. He gestured with a long, clawed finger towards a collection of tools laid out on a nearby table. Pliers, wrenches, a rusty saw, and a variety of other implements of torture, each glinting with a malevolent promise in the dim, shifting light. What do you want?" Jake stammered, his voice barely a whisper, thick with terror and a rising horror. He knew, deep down, that no answer would bring him comfort, that any answer would only lead to more pain, more suffering. Vargoth leaned closer, his pale blue eye burning into Jake's soul with an intensity that felt like a physical probe. "Your friends are coming, Jake. They're so eager to save you. What I want from you is very simple. I want to know the location of where they are, so I can deal with them." The monster's words landed like a physical blow, stealing the air from Jake's lungs, leaving him gasping for breath. Emily, Anna, Zoe, his anchors, his family, the bright stars in his often confusing world. He couldn't bear the thought of them suffering, becoming victims of this thing, this creature of pure malice. The weight of her potential fate crushed him, threatening to shatter the fragile hope he still clung to, the belief that good could still prevail. I don't know what you're talking about," Jake choked out, his voice trembling, a futile tremor against the monster's will. He knew it was a lie, a pathetic attempt to buy time, a desperate gasp for air, but he had nothing else. He couldn't betray them. Vargoth chuckled, a low, menacing sound that echoed through the cavern, a dry, rasping sound that promised unspeakable horrors. "Don't lie to me, boy. I know they're coming," the beast said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Or else, your friends will severely suffer once they learn exactly what I can do. Once they realize the kind of power I wield, the kind of pain I can inflict. And believe me, you don't want that, boy." The last words were delivered with a chilling emphasis, a promise of torment that settled deep in Jake's gut. The monster's words were a knife twisting in Jake's heart, a slow, agonizing turn. He could almost see it, the look on Emily's face as she was tortured, her strong will breaking under an unimaginable agony. He saw the fear in Anna's eyes as she faced her demise, her courage failing in the face of absolute evil. He felt the despair crushing Zoe's spirit, her youthful fire extinguished by Vargoth's darkness. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let that happen. He couldn't. Jake's heart raced, a frantic hummingbird's wings in his chest. The thought of his friend's suffering twisted like a knife, searing a path of torment through his mind. He had to push through this pain, find some inner strength, some way to protect them, even if it meant sacrificing himself. He closed his eyes, desperately searching for something, anything, to help him, to guide him out of this nightmare. He remembered the Bible verse Emily liked to read to him, especially when he felt scared or overwhelmed. The one that always made him feel safe and warm, a gentle light against the shadows. It wasn't directions to the location, but maybe it would confuse the monster, give Emily and the girls a chance to find help, to find him. He started, his voice shaking, strained but firm, as he read aloud. "And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness." The words hung in the air, a small act of defiance, a fragile beacon against the overwhelming darkness. Vargoth paused, his head cocked, the cruel smile momentarily faltering, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Then the sneer returned, wider, more grotesque than before. He grabbed a shredded cape, his long arms connected to the cape's wings, and reforming into terrifying, torn bat bird of prey-like wings, vast membranes of leathery flesh unfurling with a violent snap that echoed through the cavern. His eye glowed with an unholy infernal light, the pale blue now burning with an internal, hellish fire, and his teeth sharpened into jagged, predatory points, reflecting the dim light like obsidian daggers. Jake watched in horror as the creature put on the cape, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing, his brain already overwhelmed, now on the verge of splintering. The monster before him was no longer just Vargoth. It was something ancient, something primal, something utterly alien and terrifying. He knew he had to escape, to get away from this monstrous being, to warn his friends, but he was trapped, helpless, his body a prisoner to the cold metal table. With a surge of adrenaline, a desperate fleeting burst of strength, Jake started to run, his shackled legs moving as fast as they could, dragging the heavy table with him in a futile, scraping protest. It was a pathetic, impossible attempt, but he had to try. He had to do something, anything, to wrest control from the monster, to reclaim even a sliver of his own destiny. Before he could take more than a few steps, Vargoth's tail, now thick and barbed, snaked out, wrapping around Jake's neck with terrifying force. He gasped for air, his vision blurring as the monster effortlessly lifted him off the ground, the crude cross still clutched in his hand, a mockery of hope. Vargoth spread his newly formed wings, their leathery membranes snapping in the cavern air, generating a powerful downdraft that scattered dust and debris. He launched himself into the air, a dark winged demon rising from the depths, carrying Jake with him, soaring towards the desolate location marked on the map, a destination of inevitable despair. As they flew, Jake caught a dizzying glimpse of the cavern below, the tools of torture glinting in the dim light, a silent promise of what awaited him if he failed to break. He knew, with a chilling certainty that seeped into his very bones, that this was just the beginning. His worst field trip had just begun, and he feared with every fiber of his being that he wouldn't survive it. "Yeah, right. Breathe in the evil into you, boy," he hissed. "Time for a field trip." The words were a chilling prelude to the horror that unfolded. Vargoth's tail, a muscular serpentine appendage, remained coiled around Jake's neck, a constant, suffocating promise of oblivion. The air in the cavern, already thick with the metallic tang of fear, grew frigid as Vargoth's massive, newly formed bat-bird of prey wings unfurled, their leathery membranes snapping like ancient sails caught in a gale. They were vast, spanning what felt like the entire width of the cavern, casting grotesque, dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The sheer power radiating from the creature was overwhelming, a tangible force that made the very air vibrate. With a powerful thrust of his transformed legs, Vargoth launched himself upwards. Jake gasped, not just from the crushing grip on his throat, but from the sudden, dizzying ascent. The cavern floor, with its glinting tools of torture, shrank beneath them, becoming a distant, forgotten nightmare. The updraft from Vargoth's powerful wing beats roared past Jake's ears, a terrifying symphony of rushing wind and the rhythmic thunderous thwack-thwack of the leathery wings. He was airborne, suspended in mid-air, a helpless prisoner in the clutches of a monster. The cavern's opening, a jagged maw in the side of the mountain, rushed towards them. For a fleeting moment, Jake hoped for escape, for a chance to break free and plummet to the ground, choosing a swift end over prolonged torture. But Vargoth's grip was absolute, his will unyielding. They shot through the opening, bursting out into the twilight sky of the mountain range. The wind hit Jake with brutal force, a freezing slap that stole his breath and stung his eyes. He squeezed them shut, his head swimming with the dizzying sensation of motion. When he forced them open again, a panorama of desolate beauty lay before him, twisted into a landscape of terror. Below, the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the mountain range stretched endlessly, sharp teeth tearing at the bruised, darkening sky. Pines, gnarled and ancient, clung precariously to the rocky slopes, their dark green needles silhouetted against the fading light. Far in the distance, a faint, sickly glow indicated a distant town, a beacon of normalcy that felt impossibly far away, a cruel mirage. Vargoth soared with an unsettling grace, effortlessly navigating the turbulent mountain winds. He was a creature utterly at home in this desolate grandeur, a dark king surveying his domain. The flight was both mesmerizing and utterly horrifying. Jake felt a primal fear, a terror that transcended his learning challenges, reducing him to pure, instinctual dread. He was a toy, a feather, caught in the talons of a predator, utterly at its mercy. The cold metal of the makeshift cross in his hand, a forgotten comfort, was now just a cold weight. Jake's throat was constricted by Vargoth's tail, his lungs heaving for air. He tried to focus on something, anything, to ground himself. He thought of Emily's stories, her voice, soft and reassuring, telling him about animals, about the strength of the mountains themselves. But this mountain was not strong. It was cruel, unforgiving, a mirror of Vargoth's heart. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. Emily, Anna, Zoe. He could almost hear their voices, their determined footsteps echoing through the canyons and valleys below. The thought of them, so close, yet so unaware of the monstrous power that awaited them, filled him with a fresh surge of panic. He had to warn them. He had to protect them. But what could he do? Suspended thousands of feet in the air, a prisoner of this winged demon. The flight continued, an eternity stretching across the darkening sky. The last vestiges of sunlight bled from the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of deep purple and blood orange, before yielding to the inky blackness of true night. Stars, cold and indifferent, began to prick holes in the velvet expanse. Below, the landscape transformed into a tapestry of shadows, the mountain peaks becoming spectral giants, guarding ancient, forgotten secrets. Vargoth veered sharply, diving through a narrow gorge, the rush of air deafening. Jake cried out, a guttural sound choked off by the tail around his neck. The rock faces, sharp and unforgiving, screamed past them, so close he could almost feel their cold, rough texture. He squeezed his eyes shut again, fear a bitter taste in his mouth. He pulled Jake closer, his immense body radiating a chilling cold that penetrated Jake's clothes, sinking into his bones. Jake tried to mentally recite another Bible verse, a spark of defiance against the overwhelming despair. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? The words felt weak, hollow, whispered into the vast, indifferent emptiness of the sky. But he clung to them, a desperate lifeline in a sea of terror. As they flew deeper into the mountain's labyrinthine interior, the air grew colder, heavier, laden with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. Vargoth began to descend, his wings beating with a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Below, shrouded in a valley carved deep into the mountainside, a structure began to emerge from the encroaching darkness. It was a church, or what was left of one. Even from this height, it looked like a wound on the landscape, a derelict monument to forgotten faith. Its spire, a skeletal finger, clawed at the darkening sky, sharp and forbidding. The roof was largely caved in, a gaping maw revealing the blackness within. What might once have been grand stained-glass windows were now just empty, broken eyes staring out into the void. It exuded an aura of profound desolation, a perfect match for Vargoth's malevolent intent. This was St. Michael's. The name, whispered on the wind, felt like a parody of holiness. Vargoth spiraled lower, his descent controlled and menacing. Jake could make out individual details now, the crumbling stone walls, swallowed by ivy, the faint outlines of a graveyard surrounding it, overgrown and choked with weeds. Tombstones, leaning at drunken angles, were barely visible in the gloom, like crooked teeth in the mouth of a forgotten beast. The air directly above the church felt different, heavy, imbued with centuries of despair, a palpable weight that pressed down on Jake's chest. With a final powerful beat of his wings, Vargoth landed silently amidst the overgrown gravestones, his massive form barely disturbing the weeds. The impact jarred Jake, sending a fresh wave of pain through his shackled wrists and throbbing head. Vargoth's tail slowly uncoiled from his neck, and Jake gasped, sucking in ragged breaths of the cold, musty air. His body trembled uncontrollably, a mixture of cold, pain, and the sheer, overwhelming terror that permeated every fiber of his being. He stumbled away from Vargoth, trying to put distance between himself and the monster, but his legs were weak, uncooperative. He looked around, eyes wide with horror. The gravestones were ancient, their inscriptions worn smooth by time and weather, making them illegible. Many were broken, their fragments scattered amongst the thorny brambles and tangled nettles. The air was still, heavy, the only sound the distant, mournful howl of the wind echoing through the mountain passes. The silence here was not peaceful. It was oppressive, suffocating, a silence that seemed to absorb all sound, all hope. Vargoth watched him with an unsettling patience, his pale blue eyes gleaming in the near darkness. A monument to the folly of belief, and a crucible for the forging of true despair. He began to move, gliding through the overgrown paths towards the towering, decaying structure of the church. His movements were fluid, graceful, a terrifying dance of predator and prey. Jake had no choice but to follow, his body aching, his mind a whirlwind of fear and desperation. Each step was a struggle, his feet catching on unseen roots and crumbling stone. The church entrance was a massive, arching portal, once grand, now largely enveloped by a thick, writhing mass of ancient, skeletal ivy. The massive wooden doors, black with age and moisture, hung precariously on one hinge, groaning softly in the barely perceptible breeze. A chill, deeper and more profound than the mountain air, emanated from within. Jake felt the oppressive weight of the church's history as he approached. It was heavy, tangible, a suffocating blanket woven from sorrow and forgotten memories. He could almost hear the echoes of ancient hymns and desperate prayers, now twisted into whispers of despair. The air grew colder, the scent of decay even stronger, mingling with a faint metallic tang that made his stomach churn. The ground was not just littered, but carpeted with bone fragments. Not human, he tried to tell himself, but something smaller, desiccated, crumbling, like the remains of rodents or birds that had sought shelter here and found only death. It was a charnel house, masquerading as a house of God. The very stones seemed to weep desolation. Vargoth, with a harsh, almost casual shove, pushed Jake forward. Jake stumbled, his shackled legs protesting, his heart pounding in his chest. He caught himself on the bottom step of a grand sweeping staircase that dominated the entry hall. The stone was cold and encrusted with thick, glistening spiderwebs that stretched like dirty lace across the banisters and up into the shadowed heights, like the veil of a macabre bride. Here the gloom was absolute, the meager light from the grimy windows barely penetrating. Jake began to ascend, each step a monumental effort. The stairs groaned under his weight, ancient stone protesting his intrusion. Dust motes, disturbed by their movement, swirl in the heavy air, momentarily obscuring the path, making it feel as though he was climbing through a terrifying dream. The spiderwebs clung to his clothes, his hair, tickling his skin with unseen legs, making him shudder with disgust and fear. He dared not look down, knowing the sight of the bone-strewn floor would only amplify his terror. He focused instead on the worn, smooth patches on the stone, where countless feet had once trod, seeking warmth and solace, long before darkness had claimed this place. Vargoth followed, his monstrous form seemingly effortless as he glided up behind Jake. The snap of his arms, a sound like cracking thunder, echoed through the stairwell, making Jake flinch with every beat. The monster's shadow, impossibly vast, swallowed him whole, a constant reminder of his captivity. "Why are you doing this?" Jake asked, his voice a strained whisper, barely audible above the frantic thrumming of his own blood, his heart pounding in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive silence. He stumbled, his shackled legs protesting, the cold metal biting deeper into his wrists as he tried to keep moving. The beast just ignored him. The air grew thick with the dust of forgotten years, each breath a gritty trespass against the silence that clung to the upper floors of the decaying manor. Jake, his senses often overwhelmed by subtler stimuli, felt the weight of the oppressive atmosphere like a physical shroud. The floorboards groaned beneath Vargoth's predatory, almost silent steps, the rhythmic creak of old wood a stark counterpoint to Jake's own hesitant, heavier tread. Vargoth, a sleek silhouette of menace, led the way, his pale blue eyes, usually gleaming with a chilling intelligence, now fixed on something unseen, a magnetic pull drawing him into the labyrinthine shadows. Jake registered the cold seeping from the stone walls, the faint metallic tang of decay, and the ghost of a breeze that whispered through unseen cracks, carrying with it sense of damp earth and something acrid, almost electric. His heart thumped an anxious rhythm against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding caution, but Vargoth's grip on his arm, though not painful, was unyielding, a silent command to follow. Autism often made new environments a challenge, a kaleidoscope of sensory input, but this place was different. It felt wrong, a place where the shadows held secrets too old and too dark to be disturbed. Then, a disruption. A sliver of light, almost imperceptible at first, cut through the encroaching gloom. It wasn't the bruised gray of the storm-laden sky seeping through a broken window, nor the dull glow of a dying ember. This was a deeper, more intentional illumination, a soft, pulsating luminescence emanating from a nearby room. Jake, drawn by its strange beauty, felt an odd mix of curiosity and dread. It was a beacon in the oppressive darkness, yet it felt like a lure, a trap. Vargoth stopped, his head tilting slightly, like a predator scenting prey. A low, guttural hum vibrated in his chest, a sound Jake had learned to associate with the hybrid's most dangerous moods. The light intensified just slightly, painting the dust motes dancing in the air with an ethereal sheen. The room, likely once a grandmaster bedroom or a study, lay just beyond a half-opened splintered door. Through the gap, Jake could discern the faint outline of an antique pedestal draped in cobwebs, and atop it, the source of the strange light. It pulsed, a living shadow, drawing in the surrounding gloom and refracting it with an impossible radiance that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. It was no jewel, no ordinary gem. It was a fragment of night sky made tangible, a miniature vortex of cosmic darkness. The Dark Star. The name echoed in Jake's mind, a forgotten whisper from a half-heard tale. He felt a profound, almost primal instinct to recoil, to run, but Vargoth's grip tightened, anchoring him in place. Vargoth's pale blue eye, now burning with an almost manic intensity, was fixed on the object. A slow, chilling smile stretched across his face, revealing canines that seemed a shade too long. He breathed out a name, a reverent hiss that was more sibilant than human. The Dark Star. Jake, transfixed by the star's dark allure, barely registered the subtle shift in the air, the sudden, ominous silence that preceded the attack. One moment, he was staring at the cosmic anomaly. The next, a blur of motion exploded in his peripheral vision. Vargoth, without warning, the creature of pure instinct and cold calculation, swung. It wasn't a punch, nor a kick. It was a belt, a thick leather strap, wielded with surprising force and precision. The impact exploded against the side of Jake's head, just above his ear, a concussive shockwave that reverberated through his skull, stealing his breath. A blinding flash of white light, internal and excruciating, erupted behind his eyes, eclipsing the strange glow of the star. His vision swam with kaleidoscopic patterns, a chaotic symphony of pain that ripped through his brain. Then came the sickening lurch, the ground plummeting away as darkness, absolute and ravenous, consumed him. He felt his knees buckle, his body crumple, the last shred of consciousness dissolving into a void, cold as interstellar space. Vargoth stood over Jake's inert form for a moment, his gaze devoid of remorse, before turning back to the Dark Star. A low, triumphant chuckle rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. The Dark Star, So it does exist. His voice, usually a chilling whisper, now held a tremor of exhilaration, as if a lifetime of searching had finally culminated in this very moment. He took a step, then another, his movements imbued with a newfound grace, a predatory dance of possession. The faint glow of the stars seemed to pulse in response to his approach, its tendrils of shadowy light reaching out, beckoning. The room felt charged, the air humming with an almost palpable energy that resonated with Vargoth's own dark aura. "Yes," he murmured, his voice now a low, fervent incantation. "This is it. Show me your power." With a slow, deliberate reverence, Vargoth extended both hands. His fingers, long and almost skeletal, brushed against the star's cold, smooth surface. It pulsed, brighter now, the dark energy within it stirring, responding to his touch. A sensation unlike anything he had ever experienced surged through him. Not fire, but an inverse heat. A chilling, all-consuming draft of pure darkness. The energy began to siphon, a silky, viscous current flowing from the star into his outstretched hands, up his arms, and into his very core. He felt it spread through his veins, a black ichor replacing his blood, invigorating every cell. His senses sharpened, the faint sense of dust and decay replaced by a tapestry of every living thing within miles, every breath, every heartbeat. The storm brewing outside resonated with a symphony of chaotic power, and he felt an immediate, profound connection to it. He breathed it in, the dark energy filling his lungs, his chest expanding with an unnatural strength, a sensation of boundless potential. It tasted like ozone and forgotten nightmares, a draught of pure, unadulterated power. He felt himself changing, evolving, the hybrid predator shedding another layer of its mortal coil, ascending to something else, something more. His mind, already cunning and merciless, became a vast, intricate web of dark calculations, of strategies for domination. He could feel the threads of fate, could almost pluck them, manipulate them. A smile, wide and predatory, stretched across his face. This was it. This was everything he had sought. The power coursing through him was intoxicating, a glorious, terrible truth. He had found his weapon, his ultimate tool. Satisfied, the dark star now a part of him, an extension of his will, he felt confident enough to carry out his ultimate goal. The butterfly girls, those annoying, resilient nuisances who had dared to stand against him, would finally fall. He pictured their faces, the fury, the fear, the defiance, and a thrill of dark pleasure shot through him. They would be crushed, utterly, irrevocably, under the weight of his newfound might. The gain, he knew, was about to become infinitely more interesting. A dull ache throbbed behind Jake's eyes, a persistent, rhythmic pulse that gradually pulled him from the suffocating depths of unconsciousness. The first sensation was cold, bone-aching cold, followed by the metallic taste of blood that coated his tongue, acrid and coppery. He coughed, a dry, rasping sound that scraped against his raw throat, and the movement sent a fresh wave of pain rippling through his head. His eyes flickered open, heavy lids struggling against an overwhelming grogginess. The world was a blurry, disorienting mess of fractured light and shadow. He was lying on something hard, unforgiving, stone perhaps. A faint, distant rumble of thunder provided a mournful soundtrack to his awakening. As his vision slowly cleared, the horrifying reality of his situation began to solidify, pressing in on him from every angle. He was caged, trapped in a rusty iron cage, its bars thick and unforgiving, rising around him like the skeletal ribs of some ancient beast. Rust flaked onto his clothes as he instinctively tried to push himself up, the cold metal biting into his wrists and shoulders. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of mildew and decay, a suffocating silence pressing in on him, broken only by the distant growling thunder and the frantic hammering of his own heart. His breath hitched in his throat, a silent scream trapped within his struggling lungs. Panic, raw and visceral, clawed at his throat, a desperate animal trapped in a corner. His mind, usually a complex tapestry of patterns and numbers, now felt like a shattered mosaic, racing and fragmented. He rattled the cage, a futile gesture born of pure, unadulterated desperation. The metal shrieked, a grating protest that echoed through the vast hollow space. Each jarring movement sent sharp jolts of pain through his head, but he couldn't stop. He needed to get out. He needed something. His hands gripped the cold bars, the rust biting into his skin, a futile gesture against the steel. The thought of Emily, of Anna and Zoe, flickered in his pain-riddled mind, a faint beacon in the encroaching despair. Would they know he was here? Could they help? His questions were answered, not by a reassuring presence, but by a sound that sent a shiver of ice down his spine. Vargoth's laughter. It echoed through the chapel, cold and devoid of any humanity, a chilling symphony of malice that seemed to reverberate off the crumbling stone walls, mocking his plight. Jake's eyes darted around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. The chapel was vast, dilapidated, a skeletal corpse of its former glory. Broken stained-glass windows, like shattered eyes, stared blankly at a crumbling altar. Pews lay overturned, splintered and rotting. Dust motes danced in the sparse light, filtering through the grime-caked windows high above, creating an eerie, spectral glow. A sense of profound desolation hung in the air, a graveyard for forgotten prayers. Vargoth emerged from the shadows near the altar, a shadowy figure bathed in the faint oppressive glow, his form subtly different, more imposing, more dark. His pale blue eyes, now glowing with an unnatural intensity. "You belong here, kid," Vargoth taunted, his voice dripping with malice, its usual silken purr now laced with a new, dangerous edge. The power of the Dark Star had imbued his voice with a resonance that vibrated through Jake's very bones. Just like all the lost souls, Jake felt a fresh wave of terror, a cold dread seeping into his very marrow. Lost souls? Was this where everyone Vargoth had taken ended up? He was just another victim, another discarded plaything. The thought made his stomach churn. Anger, sharp and hot, flared amidst his fear. He wasn't lost. He wasn't. Outside, the storm broke with a vengeance. The distant rumble intensified into a deafening roar, a cosmic drumbeat against the earth. Wind howled, a banshee's shriek tearing at the crumbling facade of the chapel, stripping away loose shingles and sending shards of shattered glass tinkling to the ground. Trees, ancient and gnarled, bent into grotesque, supplicating shapes, their branches thrashing like desperate limbs against an unseen tormentor. Rain began to lash down, a torrential downpour that hammered against the chapel, a relentless assault. Vargoth stood at the edge of the shattered altar, his head tilted back, a primal smile gracing his lips. He closed his eyes for a moment, his chest expanding with a deep, slow breath, almost as if he were inhaling the very essence of the chaos. He could feel the chaotic energy, the raw power of the storm fueling his dark desires, his newly acquired strength resonating with the tempest. The Dark Star pulsed faintly within him, a dark heart beating in time with the raging elements. The world outside in its fury was a mirror to the power now contained within him. He took a slow, deliberate step closer to the cage, his shadow stretching long and distorted in the flickering light. Jake recoiled, pressing himself against the far bars, a whimper escaping his lips. Vargoth's presence was overwhelming, suffocating. The air around him was visibly distorted, shimmering with a dark energy that Jake could almost taste, bitter, like burnt metal and despair. "Let's see how long you'll play my little game, Emily," Vargoth cackled, his voice rising above the storm, now laced with a cruel, anticipating glee. The name, Emily, hung in the air, a silent plea and a sharp warning. He savored their names, tasting them on his tongue, each syllable a morsel of his impending victory. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and now, armed with the Dark Star's power, he knew they stood no chance. He could taste her fear, Emily's fear, hot and desperate, even from miles away. But he also tasted her determination, her fierce, unyielding will. It was a heady brew, a symphony of despair and defiance that only fueled his depraved pleasure. He wanted her to come. He needed her to come. The confrontation, he knew, would be exquisite. Vargoth's cruel laughter echoed through the forest as a particularly violent gust of wind tore a section of the roof away, sending debris scattering. The fate of Jake, of Emily, of Anna and Zoe, perhaps even the world, hung precariously in the balance, suspended between the blinding flashes of lightning and the hungry shadows. The storm raged, both within and without, a furious overture to the impending clash. The battle between light and darkness, between hope and overwhelming despair, was about to begin.